Section 6.6 Proportionality Theorems. Our goal is to use proportions with triangles or parallel lines. So to start, the triangle proportionality theorem. It says if a line is drawn such that it is parallel to one of the sides of the triangle, splits the other sides proportionally. So in this case, if you have this new line is parallel to side AB, then it splits BC, so BE over EC is split the same way as AD over DC. And one of the things to remember on these is that both of these were between the parallel lines in the numerator. It could be both in the denominator. We've seen that the reciprocals, whether you have A over B or B over A, as long as you have, C over D the same way, doesn't matter whether you do the reciprocal. They're still proportional. It's just the gap between the parallel lines needs to be either in both numerators or both denominators. The converse says if they're proportional, so if BE over EC is equal to AD over DC, then DE is parallel to AB. So if they're proportional, the lines are parallel. So the regular one, the normal one says, given they're parallel, then they're proportional. Converse, if proportional, then parallel. So just like all our other converses from chapter 3, if you're making parallel lines, it's the converse. If you are given parallel, it's the regular, straightforward. So we're asked to find EC on the diagram at right, and we are given that ED is parallel to BA. So since we're given parallel, it is the proportionality theorem, and we will say that 20 over 15 is equal to 12 over this unknown value of x. And again, I went with the side, I had both of them. I picked the one that was between the parallel lines first, so 20 over the other one, 15. Side between was 12, other one is x. And now I'm going to cross multiply and solve. So I have 20x equals 180, so x equals 9, which happens to be the length of EC. Right. A brace is added to a shed as shown. So we're looking at this reddish line going through here. Explain why the brace is not parallel to the ground. So what happens is it would be parallel if these are proportional. So 16 over, well, I guess the side between the parallels would be 24. So 24 over 16 is equal to 20 over 20. And it's clear that 24 over 16 is clearly over 1. 20 over 20 is 1. So they're not parallel because they are not proportional. That's all it's really asking. Alright, transversals of parallels. What's going to happen is you're going to have 3 or more parallel lines split by a transversal. So we will say if 3 or more parallel lines intersect a transversal, then they split the transversal proportionally. In other words, if I'm talking here, the ratio of Mn over No is going to equal Jk over Kl. Now, the tricky thing is this gap was in the numerator, so this gap has to be the numerator as well. And so, and you could do this with, say you had another parallel line in here. You can have, say this was P, J, K, and this was I. You could use this gap and that gap as well. You can pick any 2 pairs of gaps. So it really depends on the situation. A lot of problems you're going to see involving streets, like this one, for example. So it says find the length from Main Street to 2nd Street along the diagonal street. Alright, so we have 1st Street, 2nd Street, we have Main Street. We are running under the assumption that all of these streets are parallel. Oh, sorry, we can assume, we can say they are parallel because we have a pair of corresponding angles there. And here, to say that all of these streets are parallel. So Main Street, 1st Street, 2nd Street are all parallel because of the corresponding angles. We know corresponding angles converse if the corresponding angles are congruent to lines of parallel. So we can have a proportion. So let's go with the gap between Main Street and 1st Street. So this gap here, we will identify those 2 as being our numerator. So 320. So 320 meters over the next gap is 160 meters is equal to 340 over, let's call this Z for something different, Z meters. All of these problems are meters, so those can all cancel. I got some zeros here, so I'm going to cancel those. 32 over 16 becomes 2 over 1. Trying to make this a little bit easier to work with, so 340 equals 2Z. And thus Z equals 170, and our unit was meters. So this was 170 meters. Now the thing is, that is the distance from 1st to 2nd. The problem asks, what is it from Main to 2nd? So we need to add those 2 values. So we add those 2 together and we get 510 meters. The other thing that comes up in this section is the angle bisector of a triangle theorem. What happens in this theorem is that we have an angle bisector and it creates a proportion. So an angle bisector divides the opposite side proportionally to the sides of the angle. So what happens here is, we'll say if GI bisects angle FGH, then what happens is we get a proportion. So we start with saying that Fi over IH. So it splits this third side here, Fi and IH, equal to the ratio of the sides of the angle. What happens is it's GF over GH. And you'll notice when doing these, both of them have F are on top. And both of them that share H are on bottom. So when doing the angle bisector, you can say to split the sides however you would like. It's just whichever side shares a vertex needs to also be in the numerator or denominator with it. A bit of a tricky example here. You're asked to find HI and Fi. We're given that Fi is X and all of HF is 40. Meaning, we don't know what X is, but the whole thing is 40, so once we find X, we'll subtract from 40. Meaning that this is 40 minus X. So a little tricky here, we're going to have X over 40 minus X equals, now X shares a side with 24, so 24 is in the numerator, and 32 is in the denominator. And I'm going to reduce this to be 3/4, so that I have 4x equals 120 minus 3x. So again, I am distributing right away. I'm going to add the 3 to both sides and have 7x equals 120. Divide by 7, I get x equals 17.14. Again, it's not the greatest answer, but you're not always, when solving triangles, going to get full numbers. That's equal to Fi, and we also need to find HI. So earlier we said that HI is 40 minus X, so this is 40 minus 17.14, which is 22.86. Again, make sure you read carefully on what the problem is asking. Some of these will ask you multiple things. Some of these will ask you what you can directly solve. Some will ask you what you need to do a couple steps of solving to get to.